Hey, welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. It is Friday, April 22nd. We are inside of a week until the NFL draft. One of my favorite topics to discuss. We cover these players as high schoolers, we cover them in college. We don't really get to cover them in the NFL. So this is kind of a final step as they leave college and realize their NFL dreams, sign their deals, hopefully make it through camp, everything else, and go on and live wonderful lives in the NFL. As we get closer to the draft, I get asked a lot about mock drafts. Kevin, why don't you do a mock draft? Why don't you sit there and instead of criticizing other people's drafts, why don't you put your own out there so we can criticize it? Well, I've got really thin skin. I don't necessarily need to be criticized anymore. I have a wife for that. So I'll participate in some mock drafts as a collaborative effort, but never really put my own out. This year I decided differently. I decided this would be the year because I think this is a year where there is not a real definitive pecking order. There may be some players that we think fit really well in one program or another, but are the first 10 picks kind of like locked in? Do we kind of just know what's going to happen there? Or could we see some draft night drama? With the free agency period, we certainly have seen plenty of drama. We've seen picks move left and right. We've seen teams move out of the first round, move back into the first round, give up a couple years worth of draft picks to try and better themselves with known quantities of players that are already in the league. Now we get to the draft with first-year players, a lot of big names, a lot of debate as to who's going to be the first player off the board, even what the first position is going to be. When you're Jacksonville and you were as bad as Jacksonville was, it's not like you're a player or two away from being respectable. You have a lot of work that needs to be done. Now you would think, defensive line, you got a couple guys there. At offensive line, a lot of other positions of need. And one of the things, too, is that we all do these mock drafts and we think, okay, well, we got it. There's not going to be any movement. No teams are going to trade up. No teams are going to trade down. And then all hell breaks loose. Teams move up and down. And, you're never really going to get it right because nobody's going to predict all the trades. So my measure is going to be watching night one of the draft and the 32 players, and then seeing A, how many of the 32 players I got right as first rounders, B, then I might give myself some credit in terms of players that I hit in the right position, and then C, I'm just going to rip it up and move on with my life because, this isn't bracketology, this isn't any of that kind of stuff. It's all well and good, but you're not necessarily, I was right on 27 of 32 guys in the right slots and everything else. I don't know how you're going to make a living on that. I mean, it's great. It's a neat parlor trick, but it doesn't necessarily get you anything. And honestly, Ohio State fans are going to be watching to see what's up with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Where in the first round do they go? And then if anybody can slide into the first round, and then on day two, how many players are going to go on day two with Jeremy Ruckert potentially being there, Nick Petit-Frere, or maybe somebody else slides up. Ohio State players seem to do pretty well in the draft. And then sometimes the ones who don't do so well in the draft end up making a bigger splash than the ones who do. I'm looking at you, Jordan Fuller, sliding all the way to the end of the draft. I'm looking at you, Terry McLaurin, who is still Washington's number one receiver, despite being, third rounder? He's about to get a huge payday. So, congratulations there. We're going to have a lot of boards here because it doesn't do a lot of good for those of you who are watching on YouTube for just to see my talking head. So if you see a lot of boards, if you're watching it on YouTube, that's by design, just to have the names here. I'm going to link in the description the piece I wrote for Thursday with the draft so you can have it in front of you so you don't have to go back and watch this over and over again. But then again, I wouldn't be opposed to that. For those of you watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the bell. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't miss a single episode, not only of my show, but all of our great shows, Morning Scoop, Buckeye Weekly podcast, Gives in the Bank, Around the Oval. And then for those of you who are listening along, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps people finding us, looking for the show. But without further ado, let's see if I can get this to work right. Let's try that again. The Big Me Kickoff 2022 NFL Mock Draft. Now, there was a lot of debate for me on what is Jacksonville going to do here. Aiden Hutchinson certainly had moments for Michigan where he looked like he was far and away the best player in college football. He was a Heisman finalist, won some of the major defensive awards. Then Trayvon Walker, the defensive lineman from Georgia, he really started to make some buzz too. Saw him going number 1 on a lot of mock drafts. What about Evan Neal, the offensive lineman out of Alabama? Could the Jaguars look to move down? Well, again, we're not doing trades. I'm not advanced enough to be doing trades in here. Maybe one day in my life I'll feel like I'm enough of a draft guru that I'll start doing that, but I'm not going to do that right now. So drum roll, please. The number 1 player in this draft for me going to the Jacksonville Jaguars will be Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan. Now, a lot of people will be like, hey, Noon, don't know if you saw the game against Georgia, but Aiden Hutchinson barely showed up. Okay. It does happen. I mean, it's hard for a guy in a college football season to show up for 14, 15 games. It's hard for a guy in the NFL to show up for 17 games. So I'm not necessarily going to punish a guy in that type of situation. Now, of course, you can sit there and say that he really only had a few games where he was going up against top talent. But one of those games was Ohio State, and he had a day. So I remember more of the Aiden Hutchinson against Ohio State than I do Aiden Hutchinson in the college football playoff. So with Detroit being next up, and we're not going to go individual picks moving forward. We're just going to do it on specific ones, but they would have loved for the in-state guy, Aiden Hutchinson, to have been there, but he's not. So I got Trayvon Walker going there. I think Trayvon Walker is a guy capable of doing a lot of things. Detroit certainly is an organization. It's a program in college, and it's an organization in the pros. At least that's the way I describe it. But they certainly are a group that doesn't have a lot of luck with a lot of draft picks. Jeffrey Okudah being one, a guy who didn't have a great year 1, has been dealing with injuries. I mean, they've had to kind of dance around that position. They're certainly hoping for more out of Trayvon Walker here, as they're picking number 2. There is a reason you're picking number 2. You're just not a very good team. So I think that he will fit a need. Let's kind of look at some of the next few picks here. Houston, I have taking Evan Neal, the offensive lineman out of Alabama. Now, Houston has a couple of big-name tackles. Evan Neal is a little too big, in my opinion, to slide inside, but I think that Evan Neal is just too good not to take at that position, and you figure everything else out, and maybe you find a team that is desperate for offensive linemen. That would have been the Cincinnati Bengals for a while, but you find a team that is in a sore need for that position, and you either use that for draft picks this year or future years, or you just, you're able to bring them along a little bit slower, but we'll figure that one out. The Jets are taking Kayvon Thibodeau on my mock draft out of Oregon. He did not play against Ohio State due to injury. That didn't necessarily stop Oregon from winning that game. You could rewind about 300 days from now, or from 300 days ago, and everybody said that Kayvon Thibodeau lock, stone cold lock, number 1 pick. Could we see a surprise and him end up number 1 overall? I don't see it. But I think the Jets are getting a tremendous player there at number 4. And then New York Giants take Ike Ekwonu, an offensive tackle out of NC State. I think he is the best guy left on the board at the position. I know we're only at number 5. He's not Evan Neal, but he is a tremendous player, and the Giants have got to figure out something to protect their quarterbacks. So, that is an issue there. So those are the top 5 picks. Let's go see the next couple. I got Kenny Pickett going to Pittsburgh, and it's not as much of a case of I have Kenny Pickett going to Pittsburgh. I've seen a lot of other experts having Kenny Pickett go into Pittsburgh. And when you start to see a consensus on the drafts, should you buy into it or should you run away from it as quickly as you can? I decided to buy into it. That is not the decision that I like. When I released the draft on Thursday on Buckeye Scoop, I had a Panthers fan reach out to me and told me in no uncertain terms how much he didn't like the pick. And I had to remind him, I'm just trying to predict the picks. I'm not placing players necessarily the way that I would. I'm not the Carolina Panthers. I don't necessarily know what's going on in their front office, but that seems to be something that's being talked about. And then Sauce Gardner is going to the Giants as the Giants have a pair of top 10 picks. Big-time cornerback out of UC, worked under Perry Eliano, who's now with the Buckeyes, working with the safeties. I like that pick a lot. Now, you noticed I stopped at 7, and that is because I want to highlight pick number 8, the Atlanta Falcons taking Garrett Wilson out of the Ohio State University. Garrett Wilson locks a top 10 spot for me. He's the first receiver off the board. Falcons certainly had a lot of success with Michael Jenkins many years ago. Jenkins and Wilson are different body types, so it's not to sit there and say, well, vis-a-vis, because one worked, the other's going to work. But with that being said, I think that is the natural fit. I know a lot of people have tried to talk about Jameson Williams being number 1. I saw Drake London being somebody forecasted as the number 1 receiver pick. I'm going to take Garrett Wilson. Let's finish off the next couple of picks here. I may be going a little bit off the board here, and I'm going against a lot of mock drafts I see by putting Malik Willis in the top 10. But Pete Carroll, I think, would do wonders with a guy like Malik Willis. And I think Pete Carroll, a lot of head coaches want to have the ear of their front office. I really think Pete Carroll does have the ear of his front office. And I think that is a huge pick for the Seahawks. And I like that pick a lot. I've seen some prop bets whether or not Malik Willis will be a top 10 draft pick. I'm saying yes. So for that to happen, I think that he has to go to Seattle. The aforementioned Jameson Williams, wide receiver out of Alabama, formerly Ohio State, going 10 to the Jets. Surprisingly, I don't have safety Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame in the first round or in the first 10. I got him going 11 to the Washington Commanders, and it's going to take me about a year to remember to call them the Commanders. Heck, I'm lucky if I remember to call them Washington Football Team. I think he is a tremendous player. I just think based on ability, he's a bit of a steal at 11, but then again, you go to Washington, you just don't know because that team has had some issues with its development of players. Derek Stingley Jr. out of LSU, the cornerback, 12th. Somehow I didn't get the team name on the board. That is an oversight on my part. That would be the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, number 12, Derek Stingley Jr. Forgive my carelessness right there. Let's go to the next board. 13 to the Houston Texans. I got Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end out of Florida State. 14 for the Baltimore Ravens, Charles Cross, an offensive tackle out of Mississippi State. 15 to the Eagles, Drake London out of USC. I like London a lot. I mean, he's a big-bodied receiver. I mean, it certainly gives the Eagles a couple of solid pass-catching threats out there. It's just going to be a matter of delivering the ball to them. Jermaine Johnson and Charles Cross, I think, are the best players at their positions at those spots. As you see, we stopped before pick 16. That would be the New Orleans Saints, otherwise known as the New Orleans Buckeyes, as I have them taking Chris Olave, wide receiver out of the Ohio State University. I think that's a good fit for him. Michael Thomas signed his big deal and has just not been physically right since. So this gives them another huge target. But I think especially if Thomas is able to kind of regain what it is he's doing, it doesn't force Olave into being a number 1 receiver, certainly not out of the gate. So I think that is a good fit. Let's continue on with the LA Chargers taking Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa, a player that a lot of us haven't had a chance to see, but certainly all over the draft boards. Philadelphia taking Washington cornerback Trent McDuffie, the first of 2 Washington corners in the first round for me. And the New Orleans, who has another pick there at 19, will take Jordan Davis, defensive tackle out of UGA. anybody on that UGA defense is pretty damn solid. So I like that pick a lot too. Let's go to the next page. I don't have any more Buckeyes going in the first round, so we can just do these in large pages. 20, I have Daxton Hill. That should read safety. I don't know why I typed a D there. Out of Michigan. I have him going to the Steelers. 21, New England taking Devin Lloyd, the linebacker out of Utah. And Ohio State did a great job of neutralizing Devin Lloyd for a large part. And because of that, I really became a fan of Devin Lloyd, an All-American type player. Not necessarily one of the biggest names in the draft, but I wouldn't bet against him in a Bill Belichick system. And I know the Patriots are rebuilding. You lose Tom Brady, you lose, this guy and that guy, and they're just not necessarily the same team. It's not that Bill Belichick has suddenly become a worse coach. They're just trying to replenish, and I think Devin Lloyd goes a long way in helping them there. 22, I have Green Bay, who desperately needs receivers, taking Arkansas receiver Treylon Burks. I really like him a lot. There's some other receivers out there that I've been asked about, but the NFL metrics really like Burks as well. A familiar name for Ohio State fans, going 23 to Arizona with Georgia Karlaftis, edge out of the Boilermaker program. The Dallas Cowboys are taking Kenyon Green, offensive guard out of A&M. I think that Zeke Elliott would be a big fan of that move because of the sheer fact that the Cowboys line has been falling apart a little bit and then fell apart in free agency. So they need some things, but I think offensive line is huge there. Buffalo taking Andrew Booth, cornerback out of Clemson, and then Tennessee also staying on the interior offensive line, taking Boston College offensive guard Zion Johnson. We'll finish up with Tampa Bay 27, taking Kyer Elam, the corner out of Florida. He won't have far to go from Gainesville to Tampa. Green Bay, having fulfilled their need for a receiver, will take Nakobe Dean, linebacker out of Georgia. I like him a lot. In a lot of ways, I think 28 might be a little late for him, but the Packers would be thrilled if he's there. Kansas City, back-to-back picks. Christian Watson, a receiver out of North Dakota State. I like him a lot. I mean, I've seen other people talk about Jahan Dotson or George Pickens, but I think that Watson might be a little better suited for an offense that is looking to replace a freak. And while Watson isn't Tyreek the Freak, he's really good. I really like him a lot. The second Washington corner, Kyler Gordon, goes 30. 31, the Bengals have done a lot to address offensive line through free agency. So a lot of boards say, they're not necessarily going to be looking for an offensive lineman. Well, if Tyler Linderbaum is sitting there 31, you take him and you say thank you. So offensive center Tyler Linderbaum, 31. And then 32, Detroit is there to pick up a backup for Jared Goff with Matt Corral, quarterback out of Ole Miss. So there you go. Come back on camera here. Now, I don't know what we're going to see between now and the draft, what we're going to see on draft night. I think that there are a couple names that might be a little too high. I mean, certainly that Kenny Pickett at 6 is one that I don't like a lot in terms of where he is. I'm not one to sit there and say, well, I don't like him because of the small hands, but I'm not in an NFL front office, so I don't necessarily know what the mind thought is on that. But that's again what I'm hearing there. I kind of buck the trend again, as I said, with Seattle taking Malik Willis, number 9. I'm either going to look really smart or I'm going to look like I bought into a bad bill of goods there. So I don't know. I feel really comfortable in my pick for Garrett Wilson going in the top 10. 8 to Atlanta feels like a great spot. I mean, I could see him going 10 to the Jets if he's still on the board. I just don't know. I really feel that Kyle Hamilton is a bit of a steal at 11 for Washington. I really like Olave at 16. Could I see him going 19? Remember, the Saints have, 16 and 19, so they could roll the dice there. And on my mock draft, I don't necessarily have another receiver coming off before that. So if they're concerned that the LA Chargers or the Eagles might sit there and take somebody like Jordan Davis, maybe they flip him. I mean, at that point, it's still, Chris Olave is still a top 20 pick, still going to have a nice little payday in terms of what his signing bonus and what his slotted deal will be, but 16 would be better. 2 Wolverines in the top 20 with Daxton Hill going 20th, alongside Aiden Hutchinson going 1. I really like that Devin Lloyd pick for New England. I think that one seems to make a lot of sense. I really like Green Bay going receiver at 22. I think Treylon Burks, I think they'd be thrilled if he's there. I think he will be. Could they go Christian Watson there? I mean, if things look differently, maybe. I'm not sure on there. Seems to be a corner-heavy draft. A lot of corners going with, here in the back end again with Andrew Booth, with Kyer Elam. And I think that, as I said, Cincinnati would be thrilled if Tyler Linderbaum was there. I really do. I think he's the real deal. I've talked to a couple of Big Ten observers who say that a little too much hype there, but I'm not buying that. I think the hype is real. But what are your thoughts on this draft? As I kind of reported, I said it's the only mock draft you'll need. Well, at least it's the only mock draft that I'm doing. So I'll do a report card on the tail end once the draft is in the books. How I did. I won't go easy on myself. If this thing is a train wreck, I'll be the first one to say it and say that I'm retiring from doing individual mock drafts. But be sure to let me know, either on the Ask the Insiders board over at Buckeye Scoop or in the comments section, especially if you're watching us on YouTube. But there you go. The draft is almost here. We're going to just have to wait another week, and I'm excited for it, and I hope you are too. But until next time, I'm Kevin Noon. It's the Big Me Kickoff, and we'll talk to you very soon.